Welcome to the Artwork of You, the podcast where your life is the canvas and you are the masterpiece. I'm your host, Lori Guin, and together we'll explore creativity, self-awareness, mindset, goal strategy, and the importance of accountability so that you can paint your life's portrait with confidence and ease. Remember, in the gallery of life, you're not just a spectator, you are the art. So let's grab our brushes and start creating the masterpiece that is you. Hello, my friends. I am so glad that you are here with me today because today I want to talk about something that I think plays a big role in how we approach our goals. But in my opinion, I think it often goes overlooked, and that's our perception of time. So if you've ever felt like there's just not enough time in the day, or maybe you're the opposite and you think that you have all the time in the world, then this episode is for you. And I want to first start by acknowledging that we all know that time is finite. But it's the way that we feel about time that really impacts how we set and achieve our goals. Because it's not about having too much or too little time, it's about how we actually experience time. And that experience shapes the choices that we make and how we follow through on our goals. And so today I want to talk about how our perception of time can work against us, and more importantly, how we can shift that perception so that it can work in our favor. And I want to talk about the different ways that we tend to view time, the downsides that come with those views, and I want to share some practical strategies to help you get better at managing how you experience time so that you can actually make progress on your goals. And now again, just to clarify, when I say time perception, I'm not talking about the clock or the calendar. I'm talking about how we experience time. So for example, I'm sure you've noticed how some days they feel like they just fly by, and while other days they seem to last forever. Both of those are examples of what I mean when I say time perception. The actual amount of time hasn't changed, but the way that we experience it definitely has. And so our perception of time is influenced by a lot of factors. Our mindset, our stress levels, and even our past experiences. If you're someone who's constantly multitasking, for example, or feeling overwhelmed, time might feel like it's slipping through your fingers, like you can't quite get a handle on it. And on the other hand, when you're feeling stuck or unmotivated, you might feel like you have more than enough time. So you end up wasting it by thinking, I'll get to it, whatever that is, later. And what's interesting is how we perceive time can lead us to make decisions that either support or sabotage our goals. Because when we feel like there's not enough time, we often rush through things, or we'll set unrealistic goals, or we'll even give up because we feel like we're behind. And on the other hand, when we feel like we have too much time, we tend to put things off, thinking we can always start tomorrow, until suddenly tomorrow becomes next week, next month, or never. The thing is, both of these mindsets can be detrimental if they're not recognized and addressed. The good news is, once you become aware of how you're actually perceiving time, you can start to shift it. And you can take control of your perception and make it work for you rather than against you. So let's start with the feeling of having too little time. Again, we've all been there. You look at your to-do list and you think about your big goals and it feels overwhelming, like there's no way you're going to get it all done. You start to feel rushed, maybe indecisive, maybe even a little panicked. And that feeling of time running out can be really stressful, and it can lead us to making decisions that are not in our best interest, or that aren't helpful to what we actually want to accomplish. Because when you feel like there's not enough time, you start rushing through tasks. You are just trying to check things off the list instead of doing them well. Or you might set unrealistic goals thinking you need to get everything done right now. And when that doesn't happen, it's easy to feel discouraged or like you're failing. And this sense of urgency can definitely lead to burnout pretty quickly because you're constantly pushing yourself to keep up with what feels like an impossible pace. And another thing I would say is that when you're always in a rush, you miss out on the long-term perspective because, again, you get caught up in the immediate and what needs to be done today. And that can prevent you from really focusing on what's important in the bigger picture. And it can also lead to cutting corners, or again, as I mentioned, abandoning your bigger goals altogether because it feels like you just don't have the time to make real progress. And so if you find yourself feeling like there's never enough time, the first step is to recognize that this is about your perception. It's not reality. And no, you're not going to magically get more hours back in the day, but you can shift how you view and manage the time that you do have. And once you do that, you'll start to see that you actually have more control than you think. And so now let's shift and talk about the opposite problem, feeling like there's an excess amount of time. But it can actually be just as tricky to manage as when you're feeling that you're being rushed. Because when you feel like you have all the time in the world, it's easy to fall into the trap of procrastination because you start thinking, I'll get to it later. There's no rush. I've got plenty of time. And before you know it, the days, the weeks, even the months can slip by without any real progress. When you feel like time is abundant, it can really create a false sense of security because the problem with that mindset is that it leads to complacency. You're not putting any urgency behind your goals. And without that sense of urgency, it's easy to let things slide or to become distracted by other less important tasks. I find this often happens with people who are perfectionists or planners by nature. They spend so much time thinking and preparing that they actually never start. They think they're being productive by waiting for the right time or making sure everything's perfect, but in reality, they're just delaying taking action. And we all know what happens when you put things off. Eventually, the deadlines creep up, or you realize that you've wasted your precious time and suddenly you're scrambling, feeling like you're back in that too little time mindset that we talked about earlier, and it becomes like a vicious cycle. So the key is to find balance. It's great to feel like you have time, but you don't want to get too comfortable with it. You need to create some sort of structure, some urgency without feeling overwhelmed. So now let's talk about some simple strategies that can help shift your perception of time and use it to your advantage. The goal here is to manage how you experience time so that you can be more productive and consistent in moving towards your goals, regardless of whether you feel like you have too much or too little time. So the first thing I would suggest is having a mindset practice because it's one of the simplest and most effective ways to reset how you perceive time. The reason being is that when you're being fully present, time feels more abundant naturally because you're not focused on what's next or feeling stressed about what didn't get done. So start with just a few minutes a day of mindfulness, whether it's meditation, deep breathing, or just being fully aware of what you're doing in the moment, because this will help slow down everything internally when things start to feel rushed on the outside. And the next thing that you can try is time blocking. Time blocking is a great way to create structure around your day without feeling overwhelmed, because when you set specific blocks of time for certain tasks, you're not only creating a sense of urgency, but you're also giving yourself enough space to focus without distractions. For example, you might block out 2 hours in the morning to work on your most important goal with no interruptions. When you approach time this way, it will feel less chaotic and more intentional. Or you might want to dedicate a specific amount of hours in total to work on your business goals or your goals in general. I often suggest this to my clients who are entrepreneurs because it can help alleviate that feeling of constantly needing to be working on or in your business. So whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's that once the time has been put in, you're done for the day. Another strategy you can use is to break down your big goals into smaller, manageable tasks. Because sometimes when we think about the goal in its entirety, it feels very massive and overwhelming, and that will definitely distort your perception of the time it's going to take. So by breaking it down into bite-sized steps, you can make steady progress without feeling rushed or like you're putting things off for later. Another important strategy is setting deadlines. And I know people have opinions about this, so this is just my opinion, but I really feel like you should give yourself deadlines for various reasons. So whether you feel like there's too much time or not enough time, deadlines can really help create a healthy sense of urgency. But I also feel it's important to remember to set realistic or reasonable deadlines. Don't overburden yourself with tight, impossible timelines. And at the same time, avoid open-ended someday timelines or deadlines, because I think that by setting deadlines that challenge you but aren't overwhelming, you'll create a balanced pace to work towards your goals. And finally, a strategy that I absolutely love practicing is something I call time gratitude. So instead of stressing about how much or how little time you have, focus on appreciating the time that you do have. Because when you shift your mindset to gratitude, you'll find yourself making more thoughtful decisions about how you use your time. You'll stop wasting it and start seeing it more as a resource that you can control. So again, these strategies aren't about finding more time, because you won't find more time necessarily. They're more about changing how you view and manage the time that you do have so that it works for you, not against you. And when you shift your perception, you'll find that you're able to make progress on your goals without feeling overwhelmed or like you're constantly behind. I also want to suggest one more thing, and that's reframing how you see time, because how you perceive time affects everything. So, what if you started seeing time as a neutral resource? In other words, time itself doesn't have a positive or a negative value. It's just a resource, like money or energy, that you get to decide how to use. The problem is, we often give time too much power. We either feel like it's the enemy working against us, or we assume it's endless, and neither approach helps you get to where you want to go. And when you start thinking of time as neutral, you get to take back control because you're no longer beholden to that feeling of being rushed or lazy. You simply are working with what you have. And the truth is, we all have the same amount of time in a day. And what separates people who make progress from those who stay stuck is how they manage that time as a resource, not how much or how little they feel that they have. So my challenge for you is to think about how you've been viewing time. Are you treating it like it's running out, or are you treating it like it's endless? And what would change if you started seeing time as a neutral resource that's there for you to use? Once you reframe time, it becomes a tool that you can use strategically. And that's the key, not only to effective goal setting, but also to designing a life that you love, because you're using your time in a way that supports what matters to you. And so to wrap it up, the most important takeaway here is that time perception is just that, a perception. It's not set in stone, and it's something that you can shift to work in your favor. By practicing mindfulness, breaking down your goals, setting realistic deadlines, and viewing time as a neutral resource, you can start to make more thoughtful, intentional decisions about how you use the time that you have. And I will leave you with this. Time isn't the enemy, it's a tool, something you can manage and work with to reach your goals and live the life that you choose. So the next time that you find yourself feeling stressed because there's not enough time, or feeling too comfortable because you think there's plenty of time, stop and ask yourself, how can I use the time that I have right now to make better decisions and to take better actions toward the life I want to live and the goals I want to achieve? I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with time. Are you letting it control you, or are you using it as the valuable resource that it is? Once you start seeing time differently, I can guarantee you will be much more intentional and productive with your day. And if this episode got you thinking about how you can shift your time perception, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to reach out and share your thoughts or any strategies that you're going to try. And as always, if you found value in today's episode, I'd truly appreciate it if you would share it with someone you know who might need this message too. That's a wrap for today, my friends. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And remember to show up in your life like the masterpiece you are, because you are the artwork. Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Have a fabulous day.